And there we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you happen to be in the world today. Welcome, one and all, to Coffee Talk, adults and children of all ages, where we will be talking about what's going on in the world today and taking a look at some of the snippets from the news. And of course, we are on YouTube, the live portion, which you can find me on YouTube, Coffee Talk and Prepper University, or more specifically, at Coffee Talk Live or at Prepper University, I guess, on YouTube, as well as at Coffee Talk Chat on X, formerly known as Twitter, and fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon. But of course, this is the live portion that is on YouTube Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I do read through as many of the comments as I reasonably can. And so I will go ahead and acknowledge some of the people that have popped in so far. I see Helter is here, Dragon is here, Armored Ghost, Bingo was his name-o, Boogers is here, Gary Smith is here, and Armand says fake stream news agencies censor my comment. I'm privileged. Yeah, did you comment and get censored already? That quick? It's only been 2 minutes. And I see Jackie is here. Glad you could make it today. And you see, for those of you who can see, there is Dusty rolling around in the chair, getting comfortable. I am also joined by Uncle, but he's sitting across the room. You can't see him, sleeping on top of a box because that's what cats like to do. Again, as we get ready to jump into what is going on in the news here today, a couple of follow-ups of things that we've been talking about already that I'm sure you're already familiar with, but also a reminder. And this is something that I probably should have talked about yesterday. I probably should have talked about this yesterday. Because yesterday was the anniversary of this event, and it's an event that a lot of people are not even aware of, because they sure as hell don't teach history in the public schools anyways. Oh, Jackie says that my beard is long. Haven't been around in a bit. Yeah, see, it's my wife wanted to see what it would look like, so it was just like, no, I'll go ahead and let it grow. See, there it is, because it's tucked under. You can't tell if I pull it forward. It gets huge, but it's brushed down at the moment. She was like, oh, let it grow. I want to see what it looks like. Okay. For her, I'll do it. And Legends is here. But this is something that it is an important piece of our history, American history. Nobody talks about this. Nobody talks about this. And this was yesterday was the anniversary. January 2nd, 1920. Thousands detained by the Department of Justice in unconstitutional nationwide raids. And there's your boy FDR. FDR, the only technical four-term president. Didn't he die like 12 days after winning the last one? I forget. He was busy cheating on his wife somewhere and had a heart attack. He was at that. I know that they had an arrangement. The wife knew, and he would go back and forth to this cabin, and I think that's where he was. But that, aside from all that, FDR, popular guy, screwed a lot of things up long term. But that happened. In 1920, Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer led the Palmer Raids. Who's heard of that? It's the beginning of the Red Scare, detaining thousands of people without warrants on suspicion of communist ties, making the height of the Red Scare. The raids were widely criticized for unconstitutional tactics, including warrantless searches and aggressive interrogations. The raids constituted a horrific, shameful episode in American history, one of the lowest moments for liberty since King George III quartered troops in private homes. The Foundation for Economic Education wrote, Palmer's motivations were possibly personal revenge and political ambition. Even simple criticism of the government was enough to send you to jail. The unconstitutional nature of the raids resurfaced in later years, with similar tactics being used by the Truman administration and the House Un-American Activities Committee. These events cast a shadow over civil liberties and constitutional rights in the United States. The Constitution faced a major test on this day in 1920 when raids ordered by Attorney General Mitchell Palmer saw thousands of people detained without warrants merely upon general suspicion. Facilitated by a young Justice Department official, J. Edgar Hoover, who became known as the Palmer Raids, peaked on the night of January 2nd, 1920, when between 3,000 and 10,000 people in 35 cities were detained. Now, the thing to consider is this is at an early time in Americana when you had more freedom than you do right now. This is not the first time that this has happened. It does happen again, as they pointed out here, or something similar to it happened again with the House Un-Americans Activity Committee in the 50s. And don't think it can't happen again. Don't think it can't. We catch up a couple of comments here. I see Monkey has joined us here. Velvet Pilot has joined us. And Jackie says, sounds familiar today. And Armored says, do cats recognize you the same if you shave? I've never had them confused by it. I've seen babies confused if I had grew facial hair and shaved it off, and they've been real confused. Dogs and cats don't seem to notice. All People says the McCarthy era received a bad reputation that it actually did not deserve. What happened was the left, Hoover, the transvestite, infiltrated, abused, exploited it to make it look bad. Frankie says, Happy New Year. Glad you could make it. And That's Life says, I'm new here. Hello from Rolling Hills of Moirshire in Bonnie, Scotland. Scotland, pretty country. Getting overrun by foreigners. You need to go back to the you need to have a third Jacobite uprising and push them out. The Brits too. Just saying. But anyway, glad you could join us, and That's Life, but Not As We Know It is his title. I'm glad you could make it today. But not the first time it happened, not the last time it will have happened either. Because again, this is at a time where people were freer than they are now, and they decided to run around and round up damn near 10,000 people and interrogate them, push them around, and with no warrants or anything, and got away with it basically. And it reminds me also, going back even further than that, a lot of people aren't even aware during the Civil War how many people Lincoln had rounded up and detained with no due process for protesting the war. He didn't want to hear it. I think, if I remember correctly, and if somebody's not sure and they are able to look this up or whatever, they may have detained somewhere from 28 to 35,000 people for the length of the war. No due process, no warrants, no nothing. No nothing. Velvet Pilot said, didn't Scotland try to secede in the last few years? I'm not sure. That's Life might be able to tell you better than me. Not with laws like the Child and Young People's Bill. I doubt it. And crazy like Euro trash laws like that. And All People says Scotland and Ireland are being invaded, just like the US, Canada, the UK, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Argentina, basically any westernized country. And Anarchy made it from rural Minnesota. Glad you could make it today. But this is the anniversary, or yesterday was, and I should have brought it up yesterday, but I totally forgot, of when the Department of Justice had nationwide raids so that they could interrogate people We don't interrogate people, we interview them. That's what a detective will tell you. We do interviews. It's interrogation, you jackass. With no warrants, just to make sure you weren't a pinko commie bastard. It's important to remember that that kind of things happen. But you won't read that in your modern junior high or high school college history textbook. You'll read 10 chapters about Harvey Milk, who was a pedo. Oops. Did I let that slip out? He was no damn good, that guy. And he got a battleship named after him. As we move along here, this is something that people have been alluding to. This is NBC News asking about whether or not they're going to let transmogrified people in the Olympics. The answer is yes. It's worse than you think. And by the way, they've already done it. It just flew under the radar. But yeah, they're making it official now, and they're throwing out their own rules about the subject to make it easier. So yeah, I mean, you already knew the Olympics was trash. At this point, the height of the prestige of the Olympics ran out in the mid 90s. I think it's the last I can think of where anybody gave a damn about the Olympics. So I know, that swimmer, I forget his name, Phelps, gave them a little bit of a comeback. But the true highlight, aside from that, died in the mid 80s. Oh no, that I know, I digress again, because I know that one gymnast was really highly acclaimed. I can't think of her name, but they're oppressing her. They're trying to keep her from competing, and they're grading her on a different scale so that she couldn't keep winning. Giles, was that her name? Gary Smith says, nowadays, wouldn't the Dems want to know why you're not a communist? Yeah, probably. Yeah, total reversal. Velvet Pilot says they might as well just tell the real females to not bother showing up anymore. Oh, I guess I was right. Frankie M says Simone Biles. Thank you for confirmation. Bingo says unjustified arrests. Sounds like the Gisix arrests. This is also how it will happen, or how it will be when they pass a law allowing censorship like in Canada and the UK. Censorship on the internet, I mean. Yeah, I can see that. But back to NBC News, and we'll just cut through this article real quick so that you get the full gist of it. International Olympic Committee announced the new framework for transmogrified and intersex athletes Tuesday, dropping controversial policies that required competing athletes to undergo medically unnecessary procedures or treatment. Oh, you mean you wanted them to actually prove that they had undergone surgery, is what they're saying. In a 6-page document, the IOC outlined 10 principles, which is described as grounded on the respect for internationally recognized human rights that sports competitions should follow. It also said it would no longer require athletes to undergo hormone level modifications in order to complete. So no more chopping off your nuts, no more estrogen shots, no more testosterone blockers. So you can just go in there full Macho Man Randy Savage and say I'm a chick, put on a wig, and whip the shit out of the competition, apparently. This framework recognizes both the need to ensure that everyone, irrespective of their gender identity or sex variations, can practice sports in a safe, harassment-free environment, unless you're on the Olympic gymnast team and the doctors want to feel you up. That recognizes and respects their needs and identities, the committee said. The new framework is not legally binding and was developed following an extensive consultation with athletes, yeah, I bet, other sports organizations, and experts in the field of human rights, laws, and medicine, the IOC said. Yeah, you cherry picked them. It comes just 3 months after the Tokyo Olympics, which saw the first, here we go, transmogrified and intersect athlete compete in the game's history. Tuesday's framework replaces guidelines the IOC released in 2015, which put a limit on athletes' testosterone levels that required some of them to undergo treatments the IOC now describes as medically unnecessary. Before 2016, the IOC required athletes to undergo genital surgery. Chris Mosier was the first out transmogrified athlete to compete on a U.S. national team in the 2016 World Championship for the sprint duathlon, and has challenged some of the previous guidelines. Monsieur applauded and the release of the new framework, writing on Twitter that it takes the next step in centering human rights as the foundation of sport, unless you're a female. The new IOC framework makes clear that no athlete has an inherent advantage. They don't? And moves away from eligibility criteria focused on testosterone levels, a practice that caused harmful and abusive practices such as invasive physical examinations and sex testing. Oh my God. Oh my God. It already wasn't worth watching anymore. So just one more thing you can chuck out of your itinerary, like with the Miss Universe pageant and everything else, and the Oscars and the Emmys and the Country Music Awards and the MTV Awards and anything else that might have been remotely interesting from, I don't know, the 70s and 80s. Oh my gosh. A harmful practice like having a physical exam. A physical exam. I don't want to go to the doctor either. I don't want to go. Oh, wow. Let me see if I can catch up some of these comments really quickly. And that's why I mentioned they said that they want to make sure everybody has a level playing field, which is why I mentioned, and Frankie M again here, Simone Biles, because they oppressed her by changing her scoring requirements because she was too good, made it harder on her. And Bob is here. Bob67, Happy New Year. Glad you could make it. Bingo says, J6 Dave, I was trying to be discreet. Oh, okay. I don't always catch it. All People says, neither Lincoln nor the Union were abolitionists. Oh, I see, we weren't even talking about that, All People. The Civil War was fought over tariffs, not slavery. I know. And did not free a single slave. The 13th Amendment freed the slaves. Most weren't black. I know. It's true, though. And Cyberjack Sr. is here from Maryland. Glad you could make it. Monkey says, wasn't it Hermethides, the one with both male and female parts, where they have more of a choice to choose hermaphrodites? Which one to go with later in life? No, hermaphrodites, usually nothing works. If my understanding of it is that with a hermaphrodite, you can't impregnate and become pregnant. You're not like a snail or a slug. Snails and slugs are true hermaphroditic animals. They mate with each other and they both have offspring. When it happens in animals and in humans, they're usually impotent and nothing works. You're not going to have a baby and you're not going to get anybody pregnant. And usually they want you to hold off on choosing until puberty to see which of those two is dominant. That's something they don't like to talk to you about. Semper Fi made it. Glad you could pop in today. As well as Stuart made it. All People says, sorry, Dave, I type really slow. By the time I'm done, the topic has changed. No problem, All People. I'm not worried about it. Dragon says the IOC might as well just outright say they don't want transmogrified from competing instead of coming up with BC criteria like this. They do want them competing. They're taking away the criteria for it, because they used to make you, if you are going to claim to be a woman now, we want to make sure you don't have testicles anymore. You've gone through all the surgery to physically look as much like a female as possible, and you're taking hormone blockers so that your testosterone levels are pushed way down. That was the rule. Now IOC saying we're throwing that out, come as you are. So they're inviting them to come in and just do whatever, which brings us to South Park and Macho Man Randy Savage here. That's where we're going. Velvet Pilot says hermaphrodites are a myth created by George Soros to enslave the lizard people in the undergrounds of Paris. Yeah. It's extremely rare. It's extremely rare that you're born that way. But like I said, typically, my understanding is that your sexual organs are impotent. Neither set will function properly. Helter says, or better yet, the thoroughly corrupt IOC loses its corporate shield and most of its members get to go to trial for bribery, corruption, and other shady activities. It's a dirty bunch, and they sue the hell out of everybody. They sue everyone. You can't even say Olympic. I'm surprised there isn't a lawyer knocking on my door right now for saying Olympic on the air. When I was working for Frito-Lay, I actually have, they had the Frito-Lay games, which I did not participate in because I thought it was bullshit, but they gave t-shirts, and it's the cheetah paws in 5 colors set up like the Olympic rings on the back of the t-shirt. And the Olympic Committee found out they were printing those shirts and contacted Frito-Lay to make sure that there was no tie-in to the Olympics and that they were only going to be presented to employees and not sold. Otherwise, they would tie them up in a lawsuit. They're not fooling around, and they stay on it. Monkey says, I know some friends I know online that were born with both male and female parts and chose to go more female in the end with what the doctors looked at. Okay. Yeah, like I said, I mean, sometimes the parent just makes a decision, and then when they hit puberty, you might realize, whoops, this one was more male-ish than female-ish, and maybe that was a mistake. So they try to get you to wait till puberty, but it's extremely rare in humans and in animals. And again, it's not functional. It's not something that's functional. As we drift around here, we'll drift out of the Olympics because that's ruined now, along with everything else. Everything you grew up with is ruined. I'll just make the blanket statement. I don't like making blanket statements, but I know it's the truth. Unfortunately, everything you grew up with is ruined. Live in your nostalgia because it's not coming back. There will be no normal. It's not coming back to normal. Now, we talked about Claudine Gay this week. Wanted to make a point about this, about what's going on with her. There she is again. Oh, doesn't she look nice? What a friendly face. She's wearing Bookworm's glasses from Batman. This is a Barron's article. It says universities are facing diversity whiplash. 4 president searches will set the tone. There's a reason why this particular article is interesting as we jump off into it. I don't want to read about the author. Why does it start about the author? Okay. In the past year, the Ivy League hit a milestone that corporate America hasn't even come close to reaching. 6 of 8 prestigious institutions were run by women. 3 were on their second round of women presidents, with 2 of them being people of color. That's your problem right there. Okay, but we'll continue. In a Forbes list of the top 20 colleges, more than half had women or people of color at the helm. There are now 4 searches underway for new presidents at elite institutions, including the University of Pennsylvania, Harvard, and Yale, as well as Stanford, which is not an Ivy League. Stanford and Yale have only ever been run by white men. No matter what gender or race the new presidents turn out to be, they will be attacked for not being one or the other. but affirmative action won't be the reason they fail or succeed. There is nothing easy about being president of a university, no matter one's race or gender. Presidents must manage an exhausting maelstrom of angry alumni, students exercising their rights to free speech, union turmoil, and self-righteous faculty who carry their own special brand of political remonstrations. The average leader makes it less than 6 years before they crawl back to what they love the most about academia, teaching and writing. In the past 2 years, dozens of university presidents at not just the Ivies have announced plans to retire, many citing burnout from managing through the pandemic. Yeah, sure. Selection committees are now convening to fill these openings. Some of their members will be tempted to look at the turmoil at Harvard and Penn and draw lessons about women's leadership. They should take a wider view of who struggles at the top. Over the years, a higher percentage of white men have been forced out of the top university posts than women. Men had those jobs all to themselves for decades. The first woman Ivy League president was Judith Rodin in 1994 at Penn State, 254 years after it was founded in 1740. So this is again, this is a Barron's article. This is a fluff piece, okay? Because they're trying to make it sound like, oh, well, there's like 50% of the colleges and universities are now female led and people of color led. And just because they're all being fired or asked to resign now suddenly because of corruption and because of illegal activities and because of dishonest practices like Claudine Gay here again with her plagiarism cases, that's not a reflection on the type of people that they hired. That's what this article's trying to say. But why I think it's interesting is that you have 4 of the top universities in the country having to replace their identity politics selection so quickly. And it neglects to mention that so many of the traditional male roles have been rolled over in the last few years, were rolled over to check identity politics boxes in the first place, to put somebody who identifies as something in there, to put a female in there, to put a person of color in there, to put a religious checkbox in there. This was done on purpose. And it's backfired because the people they put in were no better than the ones they replaced. No better. As we catch up a few of these here. Velvet Pilot says, was Frito-Lay full of liberal upper management? They were full of mean, backstabbing, evil upper management who got away with far too much. We had an employee lost a hand because of someone in upper management. He got away with it. He insisted that this guy, plant manager, he was the plant manager, used to go around and bully employees, insisting that you do this and you do that. Oh, really? I thought you liked your job kind of attitude. Union, no protection whatsoever. Again, BCTGM, massive international union, worthless, completely worthless, does not help you. Now, where I worked, it was in sheeting, and that was in the kitchen. So I was essentially a foreman in an industrial kitchen as a special processor. And when they make the chips, it runs through what they call a cookie cutter. You have these 2 big drums, these 2 big metal drums, and they roll close together and you set the distance on them. And then you have a cookie cutter on the other side that spins and it cuts out the shape of the mazza flat. When the mazza gets crushed and it makes a flat sheet and it cuts it out, and they fall on the conveyor belt and they go into the oven. And there's a cleaning process. Typically the maintenance department does the cleaning, but he wanted this guy to do it. And he was a sheeter in training, skilled processor in training. and he wanted him to wipe it down with acid, but they were rolling. And wiping it down with acid is something that's done, again, by maintenance and never while the machine's running. Bullied him into doing it because he was not in his position yet. His hand got sucked down in there, crushed it. His fingers, it looked like someone had hammered hot dogs. It was all the skin split in between, and all the meat came out between all of his fingers. And that guy lost his job. The manager who talked him into doing it didn't, and it's not the first time he got somebody hurt. But yeah, that's the kind of bullshit that you had to deal with. But as far as being milk toasty liberal, visiting management, because they did their once a month, like, and I know we're off track here for a minute, but just to finish off the question, they would do their employee appreciation meal. And you all know I'm primarily a vegetarian, so I don't eat their meal. And this visitor asked me, visiting like district roving manager, oh, how do you like the meals that we set up? And I was like, I don't eat the meals. And he says, why not? I says, because they're not vegetarian friendly. And he was like, oh, you're a vegetarian? I was like, yeah, a few of us are. And there's a few other people here that are their nationality doesn't allow for them to eat a lot of what you put out there, which was true. And he was like, wow, we never thought of that. Well, I'll tell you what, the next time it's going to be set up right. You want to bet it was? Of course not. It's all lip service. I knew that. Anyways, Spectre is here. Glad you could join us. And Rodney, and he says, Miss Gay was fired for plagiarism, not her support for those calling the killing of Jews. Yes. Well, that's what well, she was asked to resign based on the plagiarism charges, which were dug up by a journalist looking for anything on her because of her situation with what she said about Jewish people. And, oh, well, it depends on the context. You take what I said in. Shut up, lady. Seriously. I know what you're talking about. But that journalist, when he was going over her stuff, he was reading through her papers to see if he could make a history. You know, how long he finds something in something that she wrote and published that gave an insight into her personality, but then he recognized something and was like, wait a minute, I've read this before. You get the idea? And the more he investigated, the more plagiarism he found into the papers that she wrote to get her doctorate. But they still won't admit it. Harvard still won't admit it. Merv says they're going to pay Gay $900,000 because she's not losing. She's not being really, again, she's not fired. She was asked to resign from that post, but they're not really letting go of her. And that tells you everything you need to know about modern universities. Bingo says if they're retiring because of burnout, sounds like they weren't capable of doing the job. Maybe they should have let the men run them instead of creating an issue that blew up in their faces. I wouldn't care if it was a woman, if she could do the job and if she was honest. But, you know, it's nothing but corruption at these universities nowadays, it seems. And remember, we've talked plenty of times about where all their funding is coming from, all the big donations, how many billions of dollars in big donations were coming from the Middle East, were coming from Lebanon, were coming from Saudi Arabia. It's no wonder they have these protests going on their college campuses right now. River to the sea bullshit. What do you expect? Oh, D'Lo is here. He says, haven't seen you since last year. Yeah, seems like ages. Velvet Pilot says she may have resigned as president, but they're going to pay her a fat salary. Exactly what you expect to happen. Yeah, I know. They got her covered. They only put her in there because she was female. She's black and female. That's 2 boxes. And she could be gay too. I don't know. It might be an implication in that name. I'm just saying she looks, she doesn't hardly look feminine at all. So I don't know what to say about that. I don't know what to say. What do we got here? As we move along, and we'll jump to the Telegraph. We're going to jump to the Telegraph. Has an interesting article about history. And it's something we've talked about a lot. I put a meme up about it the other day, and I got the usual rigmarole of people trying to blame boomers for how bad the world is. Bingo says, "Don't get me wrong, I have no problem with women in a professional position if they earn it and do not get the position because of strictly being a female or person of color." No, I get you. I mean, that's my same attitude. That's all I was saying, is that my perspective. If you can do it, hey, I got nothing to say, but you can't. She obviously she can't. As we tear around here, this is an article from the Telegraph talking about junk history, something that's come up many times, and it ties into a meme that I put up where I was talking about just recently. The meme said that as I watch people try to rewrite history, the one thing I'm sure of is that it won't have proper punctuation or spelling. But and I had the people say, if you want to blame people for rewriting history, you need to look at boomers, which of course, if they even know what a boomer is, I wasn't born in the 40s, okay? Boomers is like a blanket term to insult anybody over the age of 30 nowadays. And at least during that era, you can blame the past for whatever you want, but at least during that era, the only people trying to rewrite history were governments. Now everybody's doing it. Hell, you can rewrite history by going on to Wikipedia and making a suggestion. And that's kind of what the Telegraph is talking about here. As I'll catch up a couple of comments and move on. All People says gay says it was racist. They made her resign by pointing her out her plagiarism, but she does not admit that she plagiarized from a black person, one of the slave descendants. Oh no. And Merv says Gay was doing the indoctrination job, but she got caught. Yeah. So here we go. Telegraph, junk history miring a generation in ignorance. And here we go. Beethoven, black. Mozart, black. William Shakespeare, undoubtedly black, without question. Henry VIII was also black too, although the jury remains out on Abraham Lincoln. This scene from an episode of Louis Theroux's Weird Weekends is now more than 20 years old, but in some ways it might as well be 200. As always with Theroux's documentaries, he's visiting people whose beliefs and lifestyles put them well outside the realms of normalcy. In this case, members of the Black Hebrew Israelites, a religious movement that claims that African Americans are not the only descendants of the biblical Hebrews, but are also responsible for practically every major invention and moment in a progress of human history. They are a weird bunch. And I don't know, you got them in Europe? You have those people in Europe and other parts of the world. They're out here, and you can make them real mad. There's a challenging question. I've mentioned it before. See if anybody remembers. There's a challenge question for a Hebrew Israelite, and they'll try to kill you before they answer it. Thoreau reacts with trademark gentle incredulity. Excuse me, and it is this that so dates the episode. Now, something the BBC might have ridiculed even in 1999 seems to be becoming the stated belief of a growing number of academics, historians, and public intellectuals. There has been an explosion in historical propaganda masquerading as official history. No coincidence that it is often aimed at young people. That's because they're not learning anything in school, so it's easy to manipulate them. One recent children's history book, Black in Time, that's That sounds like a blaxploitation version of Back to the Future. Is it Black to the Future, Black in Time? It included the Roman Emperor Septimus Severus in a list of awesome Black Britons, even though he was neither Black nor British, but a North African of Romano-Carthaginian descent who happened to live in Britain for a few years. Another book goes further, claiming that Stonehenge was built when Britain was still a Black country. I remember that. I heard that. Luton Council has included the pyramids of Giza in a timeline of Black history for school children. Such claims aren't just false, but reductive. If the word Black is used to refer to anything non-white, it erases a host of histories and experiences in the process. Talk about cultural appropriation. Exactly. You didn't know Black people built Stonehenge, did you? Anyways. Oh, wow. Catching up here. Dragon says the further back in time you go, the more language becomes philosophical and poetic, but it is still raging on the young, or still ragging on the young generation. Velvet Pilot says the one to blames are the hippies from the 60s who didn't overdose and die, but became the deans and presidents of our colleges, and to a lesser extent, teachers. Yeah. All People says these losers implement the racist one-drop rule banned in the United States from 67 via the Loving case to try to make everyone on Earth into a Black person. Helter says, I've read old newspapers. There was so much more horror expressed about the younger generation back in the late 17th century. I came to the conclusion they never were any good old days. No, not hardly. Velvet Pilot says, oh, and they became senators and representatives, that too. All People says the article writer does not know the difference between the African American ethnic group and the Black American race group, as African American is not a synonym for Black. Well, being the Telegraph, I think this is a European paper, but yeah, I know what you mean. Anyway, you do see a lot of that. They do try to lay claim to a lot of things, a lot of history rewrite is going on. Like you saw there, this article cites a recent book published in the UK that claims that Stonehenge was built by Black people because Britain used to be populated by Africans, apparently, before the white people got there. It's crazy. The pyramids were built by Black people. Yeah, everything. Eiffel Tower, Black person. You name it. You name it. First man on the moon, Black. And there are people who will believe it. There are people who will believe it because they're not learning proper history at all. They're not. And they don't know any better, and they don't have any critical thinking skills to go out and actually look at it and see if there's any truth to what they're hearing. Any truth at all. Often there's very little, if any. WCM is here. Glad you could make it. Jumping in, just looking at an article from the Telegraph, complaining about in the modern era that people are altering history, and in this particular instance, focusing on the concept of how groups like the Black Hebrew Israelites are claiming that any major event in all of human history is tied to a Black person and no one else. Confucius, Black. Hitler, Black. Anybody of any significance in the Bible, or in the Bible, in history, anywhere, they'll make them a Black person. Helter says the older or last generation makes the decisions that cause the problems. Hard times make strong men make good times make soft men, and soft men make hard times. Yeah, but we're also in a point in history where we like to blame the last generation. This is something that has always happened. Our generation blamed the previous generation, and that generation that we were blaming when they were young, blamed the previous generation and so on. The problem with that is that what you're doing is bitching and complaining about how things are instead of doing anything to change it. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. If you want to blame the previous generation for anything, which follows along with the order that you set up there, Helter. If you want to blame the previous generation for anything, it should be for making it too easy on you. Quite frankly. Because every generation is going to be filled with leaders, not necessarily people, not necessarily the citizens or the common man, but going to be filled with leadership that is going to be corrupt, that is going to take advantage, and that is going to manipulate. And like I said, every up and coming generation is going to blame everyone else, but they're not going to do anything but make things worse. And the irony of it, of course, is that when they're older, a younger up and coming generation is going to blame them. And when that happens, they'll sit there and say, "What did I do?" Dragon says corporations, banks, and governments take the majority of the blame. Yeah. You can only blame the citizens for so much. I mean, you can try to blame them for a lack of incentive, a lack of participation. But how much can you really do? How much can you really get away with? Monkey says there's an actual black Hitler, just some Nabian politician president literally named Adolf Hitler. Oh, is there? Is there? Last King of Scotland? Is that who it is? So self-named. Some of you know who that is or was. Idi Amin. We'll just go ahead and tell you it was Idi Amin. All People says Congress does have a lot of warmongering boomers. Oh, those are people that got into office promising to change things for everyone else and cemented themselves to the floor there and never moved away. Never moved away. Can't get rid of them. You can't get rid of them. And the younger generation will side with those people because they say everything they want to hear and they're too stupid to realize they're being manipulated. All People says it's been said boomers ruin their parents' lives, then ruin their kids' lives. And Frankie says dinosaurs are black. How did you know? So are Martians. Monkey says it's Hitler as a last name, just trying to go around screw tube system. Okay. You sure it's not Idi Amin? That's all right. Anyway, the way that you mess up a black Hebrew Israelite, and get ready for a fist fight when you do this. Okay? Been there, done that. Ask them if they speak or read Hebrew. I will tell you right now, the answer is no. And the entire function, so they say, of the Hebrew Israelites is to claim back their heritage. We're taking it back. If you're taking it back, then why don't you start with the language? Because that's the one thing that has kept the Hebrew people together for the last 6,000 years. It's the only thing that hasn't changed is the language. Well, and you ask them that, and then the fisticuffs come up. I'm not kidding. Because they won't answer the question either. But they sure as hell don't know any Hebrew. All People says term limits are needed in Congress, but will likely never happen since Congress makes that decision. That's my argument. That's my argument. Stewart says slavery was a black invention. They don't want to claim that one. No, they won't claim that one. That's a different problem. That's a different problem altogether. And All People says, what about the traditions? They cherry pick the traditions. They cherry pick the traditions. I'd be hard pressed to go to the home. I'd be curious actually to go to the home of of any Hebrew Israelite and see if there's a mezuzah on their door. Not the door, but the door frame should have a mezuzah. Almost every sect of Hebrew faith, Jews as they're commonly known, will have a mezuzah on their door frame. All people says they won't claim Ebola or AIDS or so on. You know, I doubt it. We're going to jump to an article about the messenger. For those of you who know what a mezuzah is, you might not know what a mezuzah is. If you don't, I'll explain it. We're going to jump to the messenger. It says Senator Butler discloses $700,000 salary as Emily's List president. There she is. There's a reason I wanted to read this article, and I'll explain it here in a moment. It says, where we are. Butler announced she will not run for her Senate seat after completing the term she was appointed to after the death of Senator Dianne Feinstein. You recall she got shoehorned in there, and she shouldn't be there. And she's not going to run for the seat after because technically she can't because she's not actually a resident of California. That was the problem, remember? So here we go. Newly appointed Senator LaFonza Butler, Democrat, California, even though she doesn't live even on the West Coast, has filed her financial disclosure form revealing that she made $700,000, not pesos, not kroners, dollars, annually as president of a group that backs abortion rights. That's right, folks. The disclosure, first reported by Punchbowl, reveals the salary Butler made as president of Emily's List before being tapped by Democratic California Governor Gavin Newsom to fill the Senate seat left vacant after the dinosaur Senator Dianne Feinstein's death in September 2023. In her appointment to finish Feinstein's term, Butler became the third Black woman and the first alphabet mafia Black woman to serve in the Senate. Butler announced she will not run for Senate at the end of her appointed term, saying it would not be the greatest use of my voice. That's not why she's doing that. California Democrat Representative Adam Schiff and Representative Katie Porter are both running for that seat. She's not running for the seat because she shouldn't have the position in the first place because she is not a resident of California, which is a requirement, obviously. What I thought was interesting about this, first of all, they butter it up by pretending that that's the reason why she's not going to run. Secondly, the fact that from Emily's List, she's able to pull nearly $1 million salary for an abortion advocacy group. They must make a lot of money. The other thing that I want to ask is why it is that so many of the bigwigs at these abortion advocacy groups and centers and other related systems are run by people from the alphabet mafia. Why are you in that? How come every time I look at somebody who's huge in that, they're gay or lesbian? Can someone explain that? Because that doesn't that seem like it doesn't jive? Doesn't it seem like that doesn't jive? Especially if you want a kid, you can't do it traditionally unless you just sleep around. You'd have to adopt. Why are they always involved in that? And how can you make that much from that particular organization? 700,000 a year? Excuse me. Frankie says aliens are gray. Everyone knows that. Okay. All People says make sure the mezuzah is slanted on the inner door frame. That's right. It should be at a slant, at a slight angle, facing in towards the house, and it should be on the side where the door hinges are. So when you, at every entrance into your home, the mezuzah should be there. I bet you they don't have one. And All People, of course, yeah, that she does not live in California. That's correct. WCM says Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon. I don't think he ever lived in Oregon. Has been senator for decades. Definitely a selection. Yeah, that shouldn't work. It shouldn't happen that way. It's not supposed to. Yeah, WCM says baby blood. That's scary. That's scary, but I mean, there's some really scary, weird, satanic crap going on in the upper echelon of politics and media and corporate, not just in the United States, obviously. Scary, scary stuff like we've seen recently with the whole Epstein. Oh, by the way, that release has been postponed. Remember, it was supposed to be released as of January 1st, which means that the redactions were supposed to be removed yesterday because January 1st courts were closed. They announced this morning they're postponing it. They're postponing it probably at least another 30 days, and then they'll get back to us. And poor Robert Kennedy already jumped the gun and revealed himself as being mentioned in there somewhere. He's sure of it. He could have waited. He could have waited. Oh, Robert, what are we going to do with you? What are we going to do with you? Jackie says, what a crock, knew that would happen. Yeah, I know. They're going to try to redact something or mix it around, word salad it a little bit, pull a name out of here, a name out of there, change some context, rewrite a couple things. You know how it is. You know how it is. Paul says, sorry, I'm late in the bar. We'll watch from the beginning. What are you doing in a bar? What are you up to? No good, I'm telling you. No, glad you could make it, Paul. And yeah, it'll be saved, so you should be able to find it, of course. But yeah, you all knew that was going to happen. It's been 10 years, right? 10 years they've been trying to get a look at those papers. Judge says, okay, that's long enough. Long enough. Let's have a look at some of those names. Okay, we're going to release it. No, wait. Sleight of hand. You knew that was coming. They've been protecting these people for a decade. They tried to protect Epstein for a long time. This is a guy who was arrested, convicted of what he was doing years ago and served like a sentence of community service. Who remembers that? Then when they finally do get their claws into him, okay, we really got him this time. As Archie Bunker used to do that. When Edith would talk nonstop and pretend like he made a rope and put it on and yeah, he hung himself, I swear. I swear he did. And Brian made a $10 donation to the channel. Thank you, Brian. Very much appreciated. Dusty thanks you. Uncle thanks you. You can't see Uncle. Uncle is over there. Dusty is in the chair. But it goes a long way, Brian. Every bit helps. We do appreciate it. WCM says, doubt Epstein is dead. Really doubt it. You never know. You never know. And Frankie says, baby trafficking to people who have the money to pay for unwanted babies. Unbelievable. But yeah, you knew that was coming. You knew that was coming. And like Clinton, of course, named in there. And that was the big one that's supposed to be coming out, John Doe number 36. Clinton's been getting away with shit since he was governor. Okay. Governor of Arkansas. You recall the 3 boys found dead on the train tracks and that whole story. He pulled a lot of strings to cover that up, to hide the illegal CIA drug trafficking that was going through Arkansas at the time, and has never been made to answer for that. Never. But anyway, we're at the top of the hour. So with that, I'll go ahead and start wrapping things up. Again, this is Coffee Talk, and you can find me on YouTube, Coffee Talk and Prepper University on YouTube, as well as at Coffee Talk Chat on X, formerly known as Twitter, and fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon. WCM says Clinton's body count is at like 50 or something. Those people killed themselves. Shame. Shame. So anyways, again, special thanks to Brian for making a donation to the channel. Always, always appreciated. And thanks to everyone else. Yeah, Paul says thumbs up. I appreciate. I'll take the thumbs up too. I'll take all the thumbs up I can get. Thank you. Appreciate everybody who was able to make it in here today. Hope you got something out of the conversation, and we will catch you again tomorrow.